Welcome to Primitive Archer TV. Hello, welcome to this episode of Primitive Archer TV. I've got this bow here that I've almost completed. The last thing I like to do is shape the handle. I leave the handle blocky. It gives me a good clamping surface to press the clamps on it and mount it securely to my workbench. I like making a pistol grip handle. So that's the one I'm going to form on this bow. It's a right-handed bow, and I'm going to put in an arrow rest. So the first thing you got to do, make sure you put the arrow rest on the correct side of the bow, which would be the left-hand side. What you also got to do before you lay out your handle is you make sure that you got your grain lines aren't going to cause you a problem when you do a cut-in arrow shelf. If the grain is going this way, and then you do a cut-in arrow shelf on that side, you're going to violate the grain and cause a very easy spot for things to break. So I've already done that, and I've determined that this is where the arrow shelf is going to be, which indicates, it's going to make this limb be the upper limb. So what I'm going to do now, you can see here I've already outlined the basic profile of it, and I like to use my belt sander, and this radius here happens to be a very nice radius that fits the cup of your hand very well. So I'm going to turn on my belt sander, and I'm going to go ahead and start forming my handle. I like working the edges to start with. Now you saw that I was rolling the bow back and forth, and that's because I want a rounded handle section. I will start just taking off the edge and then rolling it, and then as I progress I will roll it further and further into the sander to give me the profile I'm looking for. This is where I'm at right now. This is 36 grit ceramic sandpaper, and I absolutely love this stuff. So we're going to keep working here. So, I'm going to wipe my lens here. At this point, I'm going to give it a fit check just to make sure of how it's feeling as far as its width in the hand. And honestly, it feels a little wider than I'd like it to. I like to hold them like a taco. So now these edges are digging into that part of my hand. This part right here, I'm going to take the belt sander and eat out just a little bit in that shape, so allow my thumb to really fall into it. This is important because you want the bow to just index immediately into your hand, so you're holding it the same way every time. Consistency is key in shot placement. So if you're holding the bow the same way every time, the exact same spot every time, that's just one less thing you've got to worry about when it comes to your consistency. So now what I'm going to do is narrow it here, and I'm going to grab a Sharpie and kind of give it a basic outline of how that's going to look. The thickest part of the handle this way can be and should be the thinnest part of your thickness, of your width rather. That gives you the most meat and allows the less chance for any kind of breakage. So this being the thickest spot, I'm going to put a mark right there, and I'm going to put a mark right here. It's where the fade ends. So we're going to make that the waist of this. So we're going to go, just going off of experience here, I like to make it about that wide. So now I'm going to draw in a fade, kind of curve it out like so. I sure hope y'all can see this. And I'm going to curve it back like that. And this is going to give me some form to give it a ergonomic grip. And then over here I did the same thing. I put a mark here. That's the thickest part. That's the thickest part. So we're going to go narrower there. Let's see. I'm going to kind of curve in there and then curve back out, giving it an hourglass shape here. So there's your basic hourglass form. We're going to go ahead and carve that in with the belt sander. I apologize for all the dust and me having to clean my lens here. Here you can see the shape is forming. So I'm going to pause the video here and go ahead and get after this one. Now I've got both waists carved in, and I got this little bulbous egg shape right there in the middle. And you can see there are some hard edges here and around there. I think the camera's picking that up. My screen is very dusty. I'm going to work on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this back to the sander. I rely heavily on this. You can do this with a file. You can use one of these. It takes a lot longer, obviously, but it's the exact same methods. Same wood removal. But so I'm going to start working this to give me a rounded shape to it. And I'm going to start that right now. I'm not pushing hard. I'm letting the weight of the bow do most of the work. Now that part where I want my thumb to be is really pressing hard up against my thumb. So I'm just going to kind of outline a little bit where I want my thumb to be. Then I'm going to use the edge of this belt sander once again to take some wood off of right there. Didn't take much to get that right. You can see my pencil lines are still there, but my thumb just slides right into that spot now. So what I'm going to do is turn that belt sander back on and start getting rid of these hard edges. And it's just going to be a light roll. This is the back of the bow. It is the spot that you need to be the most careful with when it comes to violating fibers. So I'm just going to gently lay the bow across the end of this belt sander here and just lightly let it eat into those fibers and roll that edge so that hard edge goes away. Then I'm going to switch from this really aggressive grit to a lighter grit to help polish it up some. And I'll bring the video back on once that's done. So with this style of handle, the hand, the meaty part of the palm, likes to rest on this edge. Now that can be avoided by making the handle longer, but I think that takes up too much of the bow, and I like shorter bows. So what I'm going to do is on the edge of the fade here, right there, I'm going to soften it by taking a little bit off. Basically, I'm going to scallop it out, and it's going to meet right there on that point. So I'm going to take this scallop out, and that allows this part of the hand right here to rest very nicely against this edge. It feels amazing when you're holding this, especially when you're pulling back all that pressure. A lot of the problems when you're feeling any kind of hand shock, a more comfortable handle can help with that a lot. Now, that does get into a whole different conversation, but about hand shock that we're not having today. But just know that a nice comfortable grip can make shooting a bow much more pleasurable. So I'm going to scallop out this edge right here. Scalloped out. Now I'm going to roll it and reduce these hard edges. Now, that's all feathered in nice and smooth. So this handle is now very close to being finished. All I need to do now is go ahead and put my arrow rest in. So one of the things I'm doing when I'm laying out my handle is I do find center point of the bow, which I have marked very faintly here. And I like for the arrow rest to be as close to center as possible. That allows for symmetry when you're drawing the bow. Symmetry of the stress on the limbs. If the arrow rest is too high, that it makes one limb functionally longer than the other one. So that's why I like to get as close to middle as possible. So that's just something to think about when you're making your arrow rest and laying out your bow. So now I like my arrow rest to not be straight. I want my arrow rest to start off high and then come down. That reduces contact surface on the arrow, making your arrow release quieter and less drag on the arrow and less interference from the bow. Now, a properly tuned arrow should jump off the bow immediately as soon as you let go. But if you're shooting a non-properly tuned arrow, it's nice to have, things in your favor. So I'm going to start right about here and curve down. And that is the shape of the arrow rest I like. So you notice I didn't put much of a waste here, because that would have been useless effort, considering I'm about to come into here and start removing material for the arrow rest. I like making a shallow arrow rest because it is a weak point in the bow. You're just inviting breakage if you go too deep. I'm not trying to make something center shot. I'm just trying to give a spot for the arrow to rest on the bow. And right there, that's about all we're going to do right there. So that's going to get done by taking a file and running it down that file I showed earlier. Actually, there's a big hand in this. So using this file, it's got a kind of like a quarter round. I like to use this to eat into that, but to give me a jump start, I take a saw and I'll cut a notch, or I'll just cut a line down into the bow. I'll take my knife and come after like this and just split that section of wood off, and then dress it up with the file. So I've taken the saw. See, I didn't cut quite as deep as the line is marked. That gives me room with the file to round it. So I'm going to take this knife now, and I'm going to start working my way with light chopping motions into that slot that I've cut, and it'll pop this off. As you get close to the split, you really got to lighten up your force, because if you're not careful, you'll go past that slot that you've cut and into the actual handle and create a split where you don't want one, and you've got a whole nother amount of work on your hands because lack of attention to detail. Chopping at a 45-degree angle into the wood. Just trying to make friends with that saw mark. Just kind of pop that off there. You notice I'm rotating the bow. I'm not trying to remove that whole chunk of wood all at once. Working it in sections. Okay. So here you see we now have the beginnings of an arrow rest. So you can't really tell it from here, but this is not flat. It is rounded, and it will be rounded when I'm done as well. That is another effort to reduce the amount of contact surface this bow and the influence the bow itself has on the arrow upon release. So now I'm going to find a file, and I'm going to start working it downward here to address that piece right there. You can see it doesn't take a whole lot of work. So that file has now gone as far into it against the wood as the edge is going to allow, because unfortunately there is a seam there, not a seam, a margin right there on that file. So I'm going to break out the round rasp and continue to address this remaining amount of wood that needs to come off. And again, you should see that I'm not laying it flat here because I don't want a flat rest. I'm coming in at an angle, and I work the whole thing in sections. So now I've worked that edge, now I'm going to work more towards the middle. One of the things I need to concentrate on removing is the saw mark that's still there. It is deeper than the surface. I did not carve all the way down. Working it here in a rocking motion. I'm both pushing down and at a 45-degree angle here. You can see the progress is being made. I still have, let's see if I can, I still have some of this saw mark here to go. So I'm going to keep working on that. I like to roll the file against my pants when it starts loading up. Shine some light on the subject here. So I'm going to keep doing this until that saw mark is gone. Saw mark is now gone, but the shape of the arrow rest is very clearly not fit for an arrow yet. So what I'm going to do now is come back out here with this quarter round. The margin on this quarter round will fall into that arrow rest and allow me to start removing wood here off the strike plate, which is this area right here. You can see going in a method pattern that'll allow this to stay rounded. Here at the throat of your arrow pass, you also have fletching that need to come through. So if this is too sharp of an edge, it's going to eat the fletching right off on every shot. You're going to lose a feather, and that's very frustrating. It throws off your shot amongst other problems. So what you want to make sure is that this is not a sharp angle. You're going to come in here with your file and just feather that down. That'll help prevent that from being a problem. You also want to make your radius one that's not so tight that it becomes a problem as well. Now you need to make sure that the throat here and here, this edge and this edge, are smooth transitions. Because again, your arrow doesn't like going through sharp edges. So any contact your bow has, I mean, you want minimal contact, but any contact that you do have, you want it to be as smooth a transition as it can possibly be. Now this is a fantastic wood removing tool but with its aggressive teeth, it'll inevitably leave grooves. So I'll come in, even though this is also aggressive, you can slide it down as you go forward, and you can use it to help remove a lot of that tooling marks from your strike plate. And you come in at a 45-degree angle the other direction, with minimal effort here, you'll have a surface that's almost ready for sanding. Now I still have a very deep indentation here with a lip from this file, so I'm going to start working on removing that just by coming in at a steeper angle, which is admittedly kind of awkward. So I'm going to work on that and then come back to the video. This is the final shape. I will now take a knife and just use it as a scraper, or if you have a card scraper or a cabinet scraper, and come here. Don't forget, you do need to round this edge. All edges are rounded. And remove my tooling marks. And if you're good with your files, there's really not a whole lot left to remove. So now I'm going to take an arrow and test my fit on my new arrow rest. Stand the bow up. Yeah, so that works fairly well. Most people don't actually shoot with the bow up and down, but it does hold the arrow. It helps to do it at 45. Keep this finger at the ready in case you have to pop it back on in case it wants to fall off. That went right on, look at that. That works. And held at 90 degrees, you can see how little surface contact this arrow actually has with the bow. And that's ideal. That's what you want. So the only thing left now is to take a scraper, and I like to use my K-bar, not sponsored by them, and just remove all my tooling marks from the whole handle. And I'll scrape at a 45 one way, then come back at a 45 the other way, and that helps prevent and remove any washboarding that may occur. So I'm going to get this handle scraped and return to the video. Something I noticed while I was scraping around this area and up here in the throat of the grip is I'm using a technique that I think maybe some of you guys like to see. It's kind of hard just to scrape all the way through. Sometimes you need to put a little pressure in one specific spot. So I'll grip the bow firmly with my hand, leaving my thumb to float free, and I'll rotate the bow wrist while pushing forward with the thumb, or the knife wrist while pushing forward with the thumb. And I'll also reverse that to come back the other way. Typically, you want to scrape in a downward way. You don't want to actually scrape uphill. That's a good way to get chatter, also known as washboarding. So you want to scrape in a downward way. And I thought you might like to see how I'm doing this. And with correct techniques, you can get this polished smoother than you could ever do it with sandpaper without going into extreme grits. So, and I see y'all are going to see me grabbing the knife by the blade all the time. I admit that is probably not the smartest thing ever, and well, I'm prone to drawing my own blood. So what I'd like to do is I like to keep the knife kind of dull, to be honest with you. I cannot shave with this. I cannot. If I could shave with this, my hand would be in tatters. So I keep a slightly dull knife. Woodworkers may like to argue with me on it, but I tell you what, since I don't keep my knife so sharp, I've found that I keep most of my hydraulic fluids inside of my body, and that makes me happier. So some of you experienced woodworkers may have extra other techniques that y'all like to use, and if you do, I'd like to hear about them. Always open to learning new things. So scraping a downward way on a curved surface. Don't try to scrape uphill, always go downhill. And that doesn't require a lot of pressure. You can see I'm making wood shavings with very, very light pressure. And if you want to copy this, maybe you can take a piece of masking tape and wrap it around your blade. That way you're protecting your hand from it if you like to keep your blade sharp. But that's that. I'm going to call that handle fairly well finished. I'm going to take care of some fibers I see poking up here. And the next step on this bow is I'm going to back it with a snake skin. That'll be another episode. So thank y'all for watching. And if you got something that you'd like to share, feel free to do so. This is the first video in the Primitive Archer TV series. Please go to primitivearcher.com, sign up, become a member to discuss this video and all the others that are coming. There is tons of content on that website, and it is a fantastic resource for all bowyers, both new and experienced. Again, I thank you for your time. Y'all have a good day.